The fossil record is an astonishing window into our planet's deep past. Although much of it remains incomplete, every now and then a truly extraordinary discovery is made that provides us with a tantalising glimpse of the biology of long-dead animals. Despite all the incredible fossils found of dinosaurs' hard parts, such as their skeletons, teeth and armour, fossilised remains of dinosaurs' softer parts are still rare discoveries. Impressions of dinosaur scales, traces of feathery plumage, and sometimes mineralized skin itself have all been found and tell scientists a great deal about the exterior appearance of these wondrous beasts in life. But sometimes even rarer dinosaur fossils are found, those that preserve the structures of internal organs. Such discoveries are few and far between, but they are among the most stunning of all prehistoric revelations. So let's take a look at 3 such astonishing and exceptional finds. Here are 3 dinosaur fossils that preserve internal organs. First of all, one of the most breathtaking dinosaur fossils to ever be found is that of a baby meat-eating theropod uncovered from approximately 113 million-year-old rocks in Italy. This juvenile dinosaur is named Scipionyx samniticus, and within its ribcage, the remains of this tiny animal's heart, stomach, intestines, windpipe, and other internal soft tissues can still be seen all this time after its death. It's no understatement to say that Scipionyx is a one-of-a-kind fossil. No other dinosaur has been found with such extensive preservation of the internal organs, and this discovery sent waves through the scientific community when it was officially announced to the world in 1998. Scipionyx was originally found by a fossil collector in 1981 in a small quarry located some 30 miles northeast of Naples. But for a long time, this collector didn't realise quite what it was he discovered. Apparently he thought these bones belonged to a kind of prehistoric bird, and he started preparing the fossil in his own home. He tried to strengthen the fossil by taking away parts of the rock overlaying it and putting vinyl glue onto the bones. He even went as far as to place some extra slabs of rock around the outsides, including one slab which he added a fake tail onto, to complete the missing part. But then in 1993, apparently after he'd just watched Jurassic Park, he realised he might have something quite significant. As such, he took the fossil to paleontologists at the Milan Natural History Museum, where they identified the animal as a non-bird dinosaur, making it the first non-bird dinosaur to be found in all of Italy. Between 1993 and its official naming in 1998, museum scientists cleaned up the fossil, removing the fake tail and exposing more of the real bone underneath the rock. It was during this preparation process that they realised the fossil's true importance. As more of the skeleton was uncovered beneath the rock that the collector had not previously removed, the museum preparator revealed mineralised remains of internal organs still in place within the dinosaur's body cavity after more than 100 million years. Due to its extraordinary nature, the Scipionyx fossil has been the subject of intense study by paleontologists, who have described in minute detail all the structures of the residual organs. As preserved, the skeleton measures 237 mm long, or about 9 inches, though its total body length in life was probably around 461 mm, or 18 inches. Going by the tiny size, as well as other evidence from the structure of the bones, this Scipionyx baby was probably not even 3 weeks old when it died. The classification of exactly what kind of dinosaur Scipionyx is has recently become an interesting point of discussion that I won't go into too much detail about here, but it was initially thought to be a compsognathid theropod, a family of small-bodied carnivorous dinosaurs, the most well-known of which is Compsognathus itself. However, in the last few years it's been proposed that Scipionyx may in fact represent a hatchling Carcharodontosaurid, or alternatively that it might even be related to the Spinosaurs. Scientists have identified various internal organs within this animal's remarkably well-preserved skeleton. Incredibly, many of these are not simply the traces of the organs, but the actual 3-dimensional preserved organs themselves, as they were directly mineralized during the fossilization process. The organ remains are phosphatized, meaning the original organic material has been replaced by calcium phosphate minerals, a mode of preservation that conserves extraordinary detail and indicates that this animal was very rapidly buried after its death. One of these organ remains can be seen in the region around the base of the neck. 8 to 10 very small C-shaped rings can be seen partially embedded within preserved connective tissue. These rings are evenly spaced from one another and look to be the tracheal rings, cartilaginous structures found in the windpipe that maintain the shape of the tube while also retaining some flexibility. The most obvious of the internal organs are the intestines. Preserved in astonishing detail and still retaining a three-dimensional structure, the paleontologist who described Scipionyx wrote that the loops of the intestines are lumpy and shiny, reminiscent of the aspect one would see after dissecting a modern animal. This really is just mind-blowing. We can literally see the tiniest details and actual texture of 113 million-year-old guts. Interestingly, the preservation of the intestines showed that this organ was actually positioned much further forward in the body cavity than had been previously assumed for non-bird dinosaurs. And the researchers have even been able to distinguish the various sections of the organ, such as the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. Following the intestine back along the body, a rectum can also be located in this dinosaur. Just beyond the rectum, a fecal pellet, the scientific way of saying fossil poop, is also preserved, containing various small fish scales. And as if all this detail wasn't already incredible enough, looking very closely at the surfaces of the intestines and rectum, you can even see the faint, branching traces of blood vessels that would have crisscrossed the tissues. Paleontologists have even been able to work out the order in which this tiny baby dinosaur ate its last meals. Near the tracheal rings at the base of the neck, various tiny fragments of bones and scales run parallel to the windpipe. This likely shows where the esophagus was, the tube that carries food down the neck. Then, just in front of where the intestines start, a cluster of tiny lizard bones, including a partial lizard's foot, indicates the likely position of the stomach. The stomach itself wasn't directly preserved, since the highly acidic nature of the organ probably sped up its decay compared to the surrounding ones. Within the intestines, some lizard scales and fish bones are visible, and then of course there are the fish scales in the fecal pellet as well. So the last few meals of this baby dinosaur were as follows. First it consumed a fish, then a second fish, followed by a lizard, then a second lizard, and finally either another lizard or another fish. The discovery of these last meals may also hint at some evidence of parental care among these dinosaurs, as paleontologists suggest that the very young hatchling would not have been fast enough to hunt fish and lizards by itself. Just in front of the intestines and stomach of the little dinosaur, there's also a distinct reddish halo staining the sediment and some of the surrounding bones. Considering the colour of the halo and the position within the body, it's been hypothesized to be composed of iron-rich minerals resulting from the decay of the liver. Analysis of the elemental composition of this red stain has since confirmed that the iron indeed comes from the degradation of the dinosaur's hemoglobin in the blood, the protein that transports oxygen in red blood cells. So the red mass is most likely what's left of the liver, but it might also be the remains of the dinosaur's heart too. In modern birds and crocodilians, the liver and heart are very close together, so it makes sense to infer that they would have been close in non-bird dinosaurs as well. In addition to the heart, the spleen is another organ that could have contributed to the blood in this region, since this blood-storing organ is also found close to the liver in birds and crocs. So, although there are no direct remains of the heart left in terms of its muscular tissue, it's pretty astonishing that after 113 million years, there do seem to be traces of the blood from the heart preserved in this extraordinary fossil. Some absolutely marvellous patches of three-dimensional preserved muscles are visible in this specimen as well. At several locations across the body, unbelievably detailed bundles of muscle fibres can be seen, even sometimes showing the individual bandings of the fibres when examined under a scanning electron microscope. These bandings are likely related to the sarcomeres, the subcellular units involved in contracting muscles. Some of the muscle fibers at the base of the neck show this exceptional preservation of detail thanks to them having been replaced by calcium phosphate minerals very quickly after the animal's death. Another patch of preserved musculature that's very clear in the Scipionyx fossil is located at the base of the tail, and muscle fibers are again visible here. Incredibly, this region represents at least 3 distinct muscles associated with the pelvic region and hind limb, including the main muscle that would have driven the movement of the upper legs, enabling the paleontologists to examine in never-before-seen detail how this musculature would have functioned in non-bird dinosaurs. Something that's also worth noting about the Scipionyx fossil is the fact that on every one of the baby dinosaur's little fingers, you can actually distinguish the horny sheaths that would have covered the bony claw cores, and would have been composed of keratin in life. It's rather incredible to see the extent to which these horny coverings would have extended the length of the talons. And it's a good reminder that when you see the claws of dinosaur fossils, they would have been even longer when the animal was alive. The insane level of detail that's visible in the Scipionyx fossil is truly invaluable for learning more about the soft tissue anatomy of these long dead animals. And this baby theropod has taught us so many interesting new things about dinosaur biology that we would never have been able to determine from preserved hard parts alone. Next up, there's an astonishing fossil of a raptor that also preserves some internal organs, and this specimen is even older than Scipionyx, dated to about 121 million years ago. This raptor, a name that refers to the family of dinosaurs technically called the Dromaeosaurids, is known from an almost completely preserved skeleton on a slab of rock that was unearthed in northern China. In 2022, this specimen was scientifically described and recognized as belonging to a new species, which was given the name Daurlong wangi. This was a relatively small dromaeosaur, measuring about 1.5 meters or 4.9 feet in length. It would have been covered in a fluffy coat of feathers, and some of these feathers can even be seen preserved alongside the skeleton. Plumage can be seen down the head, neck, and back, plus there are more traces of some short feathers along the tail. I should also note that there's a small frog skeleton preserved next to the foot of the Daurlong skeleton, so that's a neat little bonus fossil. I like to think they were friends. But the really spectacular preservation of soft tissue structures is seen within Daurlong's body cavity. Within the back half of this raptor's abdomen, a bluish coloured layer is visible, which the paleontologists noted as closely matching the layout of the intestines that are preserved in Scipionyx, extending forwards to the exact same point in the body as in the other fossil. The texture of the bluish layer in Daurlong is also strikingly similar to that of Scipionyx. Examining the layer under a scanning electron microscope, the scientists observed that it was composed of many tightly packed microcrystals, just like the intestine of Scipionyx. This microstructure therefore indicates that the layer does indeed represent the intestines of this raptor. The activity of decay bacteria operating just after the death of the dinosaur would have driven the mineralization of the tissue, causing all these tiny microcrystals to form and replicate the overall shape and extent of a part of the ancient animal's guts. Once again, it's also interesting that Daurlong doesn't preserve any remnant of the stomach, despite the intestines being here. It seems likely that, similar to Scipionyx, the region of the stomach was very acidic even after death, probably speeding up the decay of the organ. The fact that the intestine of Daurlong is so similar in structure and placement to Scipionyx is rather intriguing too. Scipionyx was quite distantly related to Daurlong, especially if Scipionyx turns out to indeed be a close relative of the Carcharodontosaurids or Spinosaurs. Daurlong, as a dromaeosaurid, was much closer to birds on the dinosaur evolutionary tree, and so the similarities observed between the internal organs of these two different dinosaurs suggest that a lot of meat-eating theropod dinosaurs probably had quite conservative digestive systems, if these two somewhat distantly related species had intestinal layouts that can be compared this closely. It's an interesting bit of soft tissue biology that we would never have been able to confirm if it wasn't for remarkable fossil discoveries such as this. So far, we've looked at some extraordinary fossils that preserve the internal organs of the body, but I'd also like to show you a spectacular fossil that retains some traces of a dinosaur's brain. This is a very exciting discovery because brain tissues are particularly easily broken down after death, and so are almost never found as fossils. Usually, when paleontologists study the structure of prehistoric animal brains, they use what are known as endocasts, essentially natural casts that are made of the space within the brain case. Alternatively, they might scan the brain case and create a digital reconstruction of the cavity where the brain would have sat during life. But in this exceptional fossil, some remains of the actual brain tissue were discovered attached to the sides of a dinosaur endocast. The fossil was discovered along a beach on the southern coast of England. It comes from a geological formation that dates back to around 133 million years ago, and belongs to an Iguanodontian dinosaur. These were large, robust herbivores, and the astonishing discovery of a part of one of these ancient reptiles' brains has enabled paleontologists an unprecedented insight into the lives of these long-lost animals. The fossil itself looks rather unassuming at first. In fact, it sort of just looks like a brown pebble. But once you realise what we're looking at here, it's really quite astounding. It's a partial brain endocast formed from sediment infilling the gap in the skull where the brain would have been. But across the surface, the mineralized remains of the outer membranes that enveloped the brain during life are present. Not only that, but individual blood vessels can also be seen in scanning electron microscope images of the specimen. Plus, there may even be some partially preserved pieces of the outer cortical layer of the brain, the actual grey matter of the organ itself. The figures within the paper describing this specimen help a great deal in making sense of what we're looking at here. Paleontologists already know what the shape of an iguanodont brain looks like thanks to more complete discoveries of other endocasts. So here we can see what the shape of the brain would be expected to look like housed within the skull of this kind of dinosaur. This blue shape is an enlarged view of the overall brain structure, showing the anatomy of these dinosaurs' brains. The Roman numerals here indicate where the major cranial nerve canals would be located. The lighter blue colour across the brain shows which part of the organ is preserved in the actual fossil we're talking about. Looking at the shape of the fossil itself, you can easily see the expected structures, such as the pineal and dural peaks, which line up nicely with a complete picture of the iguanodont brain. The green colour here represents the extent of the preserved outer layer of brain tissue across the endocast. Meanwhile, the red represents layers of a mineral called siderite, and the blue marks fragments of bones. Either these bones might have been part of the bony brain case, or they could have come from another source and just been mixed in with the sediment as it infilled the cavity where the soft brain once was. This iguanodont likely died near a shallow body of stagnant water, and must have ended up with the top of its head submerged in sediment at the bottom of the water. The conditions of this water were likely very acidic and low in oxygen, essentially pickling these soft tissues before all of them were lost to decay. However, the rest of the dinosaur's body was not preserved, so all we have left is this partial endocast. The outer brain membranes, called the meninges, and the associated blood vessels would have been preserved as tiny crystals of the mineral calcium phosphate very quickly grew and replaced the original biological components. This process of phosphatization, similar to how Scipionyx was preserved, was only possible due to the specific conditions in the stagnant water the dinosaur died in. So what have paleontologists been able to tell about the brain anatomy of dinosaurs from this mind-blowing find? Examining the fossil using a scanning electron microscope, tiny mineralized ribbons made up of aligned fibers can be seen making up the layer of the outermost meningeal membrane, indicated in this figure as DM. The ribbon-like texture indicates that these are likely phosphatized collagen bundles, the protein that makes up the protective outer layers around the brain. In some parts of the fossil, there are then bits that resemble the texture of the arachnoid mater, another of the protective layers around the brain. In modern crocs, it's the arachnoid mater that directly overlays the brain, unlike in mammals which have some extra layers. The iguanodont has a more croc-like condition here, as within the preserved arachnoid mater there seem to be convolutions, impressions from the actual ridges and folds of the underlying grey matter. In a few bits that preserve deeper levels of the endocast, it's also possible to see parts with remarkably complex textures at the fine scale. These sections lack any of the textures associated with the protective layers, and so they very well might be mineralized pieces of the grey matter, the actual cortical tissue from this dinosaur's brain. A literally mind-blowing revelation. The fossilized brain tissues have some fascinating implications for our understanding of dinosaur intelligence as well. In most modern reptiles, the brains of these animals only take up about half of the volume of the cranial cavity. This is because the brain is surrounded by layers of blood vessels and sinuses that make up a blood drainage system. So it's generally been thought that in the case of most dinosaur endocasts, a lot of this space would not actually have been brain tissue. But in this iguanodont brain fossil, the actual brain tissue appears to be very close to the side of the brain case, lying less than a millimeter beneath the meningeal tissues. It's tempting to take this as evidence that we have been greatly underestimating dinosaur intelligence. As the way it's preserved, it looks as though the brain tissue was tightly packed into the brain case, and took up a lot more of the volume than previously suspected. But it's more likely that this represents an artifact of how the fossil became preserved. It might just be that the brain tissue became pressed up against the membranes as the organ decayed and collapsed, making it appear that the tissues were closer together than they really were. As one of the paleontologists who studied the specimen explained, as we can't see the lobes of the brain itself, we can't say for sure how big this dinosaur's brain was. It's entirely possible that dinosaurs had bigger brains than we give them credit for, but we can't tell from this specimen alone. But of course, the fact that at least one dinosaur brain beat such extraordinary odds and actually became partly fossilized does give us hope that we might one day find others preserved in a similar fashion. So who knows? Perhaps it's just a matter of time before a dinosaur brain that reveals even more about the internal structure is discovered. Well, that brings us to the end of this look at some of the most incredible dinosaur fossils we've found so far. The fact that these internal soft parts of dinosaurs have been able to fossilize and remain preserved for all this time after the animals died is truly incredible. It fills me with hope that we'll continue to find more such extraordinary fossils in the future, and that they'll be able to teach us even more about the lives of these iconic extinct animals. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to my other channel, 7 Days of Science. Over on this channel, my co-presenters and I make weekly videos covering all the most fascinating science news of the past week. So if you'd like a good way to keep up to date with the latest discoveries, you might like what we do over there. I'd like to say a big thank you to CuriosityBox for supporting our videos. Check out the link in the description and use code BEN25 for 25% off, or scan the QR code on screen. The CuriosityBox is a brilliant gift for any science lover, filled with lots of fun activities. Here's a clip of the 7 Days of Science presenters unboxing the 2025 Spring Box in the latest episode.
Does anyone know anything that's in there? I'm actually really excited. It's been so long since This is steel. This is aluminium.
Brass, aluminum, and steel.
Okay.
And it's aluminum.
This is zinc. No,
it's aluminium. It's not aluminum. It's aluminium.
Okay, just having an argument with yourself.
We're British.
They only look convex to me. I don't know if there's if I can see the other way.
I can see the other way.
Okay, yeah, no, I can see it both ways now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can. That one, that one just looks convex to me. This one.
What are you laughing at? What were you doing?
Also, if you're a fan of science and cool notebooks, then be sure to check out the amazing designs by Atoms to Astronauts, and use our affiliate link in the description below to get 10% off. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and be sure to press that bell icon so you don't miss our next upload, and so you can learn more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all.